Bom dia, muito boa tarde, guten Tag. Hello and welcome to the event Energy Transition Challenges and Opportunities in Brazil. This event is promoted by the Embassy of Brazil in Germany in collaboration with the Ministry of Mines and Energy and the Brazilian Trade and Investment Promotion Agency, Apex Brasil. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank our ambassador, Roberto Jaguaribe, and the team from the embassy for organizing this event. My name is Thiago Barral. I'm president of EPE, the Brazilian Energy Studies and Research Office, a federal institution of the Ministry of Mines and Energy in charge of providing official national energy statistics and energy planning studies to support energy policy making, implementation, and assessment. And we also make our studies and data open and publicly available in order to reduce asymmetry of information in the energy market. Our flagship publications include the annual editions of both the National Energy Balance and the 10-year Energy Plan, as well as the National Energy Plan with a time horizon of 30 years ahead, and the latest edition available is the 2050 Energy Plan. Well, this event takes place in a very special week, which is just when we have the 2022 edition of the Berlin Energy Transition Dialogue, BETD, an event where energy leaders from Germany and from around the globe gathered to assess the state of the energy transition and discuss what's next. This year, given the conflict situation in Ukraine, governments, organizations, and the private sector are trying to figure out how to best combine the imperatives of both energy transition and energy security. The numbers are challenging. 78% of energy supply in OECD countries is still from fossil fuels. And the challenge is to ensure the balance of energy supply and demand, including the short and medium term, while accelerating the pace of decarbonisation and pursuing climate resilience. Combining energy security and the energy transition might look like a contradiction to some, but it's not. It's a process in which we take solid steps to create a new energy system based on clean energy and carbon capture without destroying in advance the existing system and infrastructure. In fact, most of the existing fossil-based infrastructure will likely be repurposed along the process. To put us on track for limiting temperature rise, we need to deploy as fast as possible clean energy resources, technologies, and business models that are already mature and competitive. But this won't be enough. According to the IEA, the International Energy Agency, more than 40% of energy-related carbon abatement still depends on business models and technologies that are not ready for commercial scale-up and deployment. And that's why, meanwhile, we need more investments in research and innovation, and also put policies in place to foster new clean energy scalable solutions. At this event today, we'll cover two very important topics for the current state of the energy transition globally: hydrogen and sustainable biofuels. Both have a critical role in reducing the carbon footprint of energy production and use, particularly in transportation and industry, but also in the power sector. We'll have a panel to cover each of these topics. First, hydrogen, then biofuels, with focus on the opportunities and challenges for Brazil. And I'm excited to join a set of distinguished experts from Brazil and Germany to hear their perspectives on key issues. But before we move on, I'd like to provide an overview of the Brazilian energy sector, the national energy planning highlights, and some of the key policies to foster energy transition in Brazil, one of the largest economies in the world. So I would like to start with this overview by providing some context of the Brazilian energy sector. And this context, I want to mention three main aspects that I consider relevant. The first one is the scale of the energy markets in Brazil. Just to give you an idea, Brazil is the second largest biofuel producer and consumer market. Brazil is the fourth largest automotive fuels market in the world. It's the seventh largest oil producer and exporting country. It's the seventh largest installed capacity generation of electricity in the world globally, and the seventh largest onshore wind market. It's the second largest hydropower generation market. So these figures provide an overview of the scale of the market in Brazil, the importance that Brazil plays in a global energy market. The second point that I would like to mention with regard to a general context is that energy demand in Brazil is on the rise. It has been on the rise. And that's important to meet social and economic requirements, development requirements. 2/3 of this energy demand are for transportation and industry. So that's also an important figure. And electricity is 18% of the total energy consumption, energy demand in Brazil. Still, so it's important to mention that energy demand is on the rise, but still energy consumption per capita in Brazil is at very low levels in comparison with OECD countries. So that's something very, particular when we look at developing countries and emerging economies. So we still have a need for energy to support social and economic development. And we will need about 2.5% per year growth in energy supply and 3.5% per year electricity demand growth, electricity's 3.5% increase in electricity supply in the coming years to support social and economic development. Now, finally, I think it's important to mention the outstanding contribution of renewables in the Brazilian energy mix. So almost 50%, 48 to be more precise, of energy supply in 2020 in Brazil was coming from renewables. That's one of the highest levels, and particularly one of the probably the highest among the largest economies in the world. And when you look at the power sector, electricity, the figures are even higher. 85% of electricity supply in 2020 in Brazil was from renewable energies. So it's important then to summarize this context. Brazil is a market that has scale. It's still a growing market to meet the social and economic development requirements, and still it's a very renewable energy when compared to other countries, in particular OECD countries. So given this general context, how come, I think it's important to answer a question, how come Brazil's energy mix is so green in comparison with other countries? And this is obviously not by chance that we have these numbers. This is a consequence, this is a result of a number of policies and technology innovation in line with the country's most competitive resources. For example, we have ethanol and biodiesel blending mandates and programs based on flex fuel vehicles that have boosted the use of sustainable biofuels in along the years. And that's why we have 25% renewable energy in the transportation sector, for example, which is an impressive figure. We have also, along many years, had hydropower concessions. We have had renewable energy auctions focused on wind energy, solar energy, and biomass, and electricity from biomass and biogas. These auctions really accelerated the pace of deployment of wind and solar, in particular in Brazil, renewable energy auctions. We have had a number of transmission auctions based on proactive transmission planning to enable competition and fast deployment of variable renewables in the power sector. So transmission is a critical infrastructure, and it has been deployed in Brazil very fast as well. And we also have other policies that have been put in place in the country, such as net metering scheme for distributed generation, mostly solar, and research and development investment mandates for companies investing in the country. So all combined, these policies and these investments along the years have delivered this very renewable energy mix that we have today. But I like to say that Brazil is very renewable, yet in transition, and it has to continue this transition because we still have a long way to reach carbon neutrality by 2050, which is a pledge announced by Brazil in the past year. So we still need to develop a number of policies and technologies that are currently not mature enough to be scaled up fast enough. So we have two challenges: is to continue deploying those technologies and business models that are mature, based on clean energies that are mature and competitive, and also prepare the ground for new technologies and new business models that are still not mature. In fact, the International Energy Agency mentions in their reports that around 40% of the carbon abatement, of energy-related carbon abatement to reach carbon neutrality still depends on technologies that are not ready to be commercially scaled up. So for that, I'd like to mention some of the most recent policies put in place in Brazil, starting with RenovaBio, the national biofuels policy, which is based on a targets for reducing carbon intensity in the transport sector with use of sustainable biofuels and market mechanisms to price carbon-related abatement with the use of fossil fuels, with the use of sustainable biofuels replacing fossil fuels. So this is in place, and this is it's been operational already 2 years with very positive results so far. Another policy announced and under development at this point is the National Hydrogen Program, announced last year, and which is being implemented with 6 axes of action and a number of guidelines that have been published last year, mid last year, and we are now working very hard to put them under operational conditions. We have also last year had the Fuel of the Future program announced by the government, and it also has 6 axes to speed up regulatory framework and market development for low carbon fuels to replace the most carbon intensive fuels. So that includes all types of low carbon fuels, and this is a very promising policy under implementation in Brazil at this point. We also had last Monday, actually 1 week ago, the federal government announcing a biomethane fostering program that is also going to help the country meet its reduction of methane emissions while increasing the use of renewable energies in the energy mix. We have also had January this year a new decree with a number of very important frameworks, a very important framework for offshore wind, also in place now, taking care of seabed rights and granting processes. And we have already seen the private sector responding very positively to that. So these are just some of the newest policies in place focused on the energy transition. And we think there are many others, such as R&D policies towards energy transition, the continuous work with nuclear technologies as well. And just to finish this comment, it's important to mention that meanwhile, oil and gas industry has not been abandoned in Brazil. Brazil, like I said, is the 7th largest producer and exporter of oil, and so this is very important at this point for energy security. And what we want to do is and what we've been doing is to put in place a number of policies so that the oil and gas industry and the automotive industries help fund pilot demonstration projects and technologies, such as second-generation ethanol plants, new offshore plants and that have been announced, fuel cells, biomethane buses and trucks, and large-scale hydrogen projects. All of those synergies are possible. And the idea is to have the oil and gas industry as a partner in transitioning, in changing the infrastructure and repurposing the infrastructure as we move towards carbon neutrality by 2050. And to give a very concrete idea of how to reach that, EPE, in partnership with the IDB, the Inter-American Development Bank, and SEBRE, a think tank in Brazil, we have put in place the Energy Transition Program, which is currently developing net zero scenarios by 2050 in Brazil. And this work has been developed with collaboration of the private sector as well, and we'll have scenarios for understanding the steps and the opportunities in more detail for the specific case of Brazil to reach carbon neutrality and the Paris Agreement targets. To finish, I would like to mention that international collaboration is a key component of this of the work that Brazil has done in the energy sector. We have been very active in international fora. For example, the International Energy Agency. Brazil is an association country and has been very active in this community. Also with collaboration with OLADE in Latin America and the Caribbean, IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency, the Clean Energy Ministerial, Mission Innovation, G20, the World Economic Forum. We have tried to be the most active as possible for sharing experiences and learning from other institutions and countries to speed up the pace of transformation and having policies, the right policies at the right time in the energy sector in Brazil. And I have mentioned multilateral fora, but also bilateral cooperation is one of the key aspects in many of these policies, including the hydrogen, national hydrogen program. And it's very important. I'm in Germany right now at the Brazilian embassy in Germany, and the Brazil-Germany energy partnership and collaboration is a very strong one, and we think this is critical for the success of our countries in delivering the impact that we need and the transformation that we need, particularly in some of these new policies and new technologies that need to be developed and deployed as fast as we can. So I will stop here, because ahead of us we have two very important panels. The first one, like I mentioned, is advancing clean hydrogen through policies, market, and partnerships. And for this, for this panel, I would like to invite our panelists today. We have here with us Agnes da Costa. Agnes is an economist, and she's the head of the regulatory advisory. The head of the regulatory advisory office at the Brazilian Ministry of Mines and Energy, and she is internationally recognized energy specialist with more than 15 years advising ministers and in energy and natural resources, and she's particularly experienced in policy design in Brazil. Thank you, Agnes, for joining us today. We'll have a short presentation by Agnes, and then afterwards we'll hear from our panelists, starting with André Clark. André Clark is a Senior Vice President of Siemens Energy Hub in Latin America, a great friend and one of the leading experts in the energy transition program that I just mentioned, which is developing carbon neutrality scenarios for Brazil. So thank you also, André, for joining us. André, I have to mention, he's also the general manager of Siemens Energy Brazil, and he was previously president and CEO of Siemens Brazil, and also CEO of Acciona in Brazil, for Brazil, Bolivia, Uruguay, and Paraguay. And André sits on the board. He's a board member of a number of industry associations. He's been doing great work in with regard to energy transition in Brazil. We also have here at this panel today Maike Schmidt. Maike, since 2006, she's part of the scientific staff of the Center of Solar Energy and Hydrogen Research, Baden-Württemberg, in the Department of System Analysis in Stuttgart. And since November 2014, she's heading the Department of System Analysis. In addition, I have to say that she's a member of the Climate Expert Council of the state of Baden-Württemberg, and she's been working with many topics, very interesting, but related to renewable energy, batteries, fuel cells, and hydrogen technologies. Thank you, Maike, for joining us. We also have Professor Paulo Emílio, also a leading expert in the topic of hydrogen in Brazil. Paulo is a professor at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, and he's head of the Hydrogen Lab at the university. He's president of the Brazilian Hydrogen Association, and he's member of the board of directors of the International Association of Hydrogen Energy. And last but not least, we have Carlos Alexandre Pires, Príncipe Pires, Calex, as we all know him. Calex is the director of the Department for Energy Development of the Ministry of Mines and Energy in Brazil, and he has a large experience in the Ministry of Mines and Energy in policy, supporting policy making, including topics such as energy efficiency and more recently also hydrogen. He is postgraduate postgraduated in policy, public policy, and government management in energy and mining sectors. So we have this distinguished panel, and so we start with a short presentation by Agnes, and then we hear from André, Maike, Paulo, and Carlos, some of their key perspectives with regard to the state of the art in the hydrogen market. So with no further ado, Agnes, you have the stage. The floor is yours for a 10 to 15 minute overview on policy, hydrogen policy in Brazil. Thank you.
Thank you, Bahal. It's hard to speak after you because you have given us so many insights and information. But to dig in a bit more in hydrogen, what I think it's important to understand is what is the stage of hydrogen deployment and development in Brazil. So in terms of policy design, this is a discussion that has started in the late 2020 because of this discussion about the European Green Deal after COVID. And as a response, we have seen several countries starting to discuss their energy transition strategy and a lot about electrification, and hydrogen was one of the big stars of that moment. And what we see were several European countries looking for competitive green hydrogen export markets. So naturally, Brazil is a big candidate and a promising candidate for the export of green hydrogen because of its abundant and competitive clean energy. And then we saw by the end of 2020 that it was time to sit down and discuss which approach would be the best suited for the country. But what is also important to mention, and I think that Paulo Emilio will be able to discuss this later, is that hydrogen or the development of technology around the hydrogen is not new in Brazil. We started in 2002 and with R&D projects and looking into several routes. So, of course, renewables, so based on ethanol, hydro, wind, and solar, but also on natural gas. And as outcomes, we have developed several pilot projects with different technologies, like a bus fleet in Rio, in power generation and energy storage, in ethanol fuel cells. And we have also enabled the creation and strategical positioning of startups like Hydron, Electrocell, and Ergostech. And with time, what we see when we think about production and demand, we have in Brazil four big companies providing hydrogen as technical gases in Brazil, and Petrobras, the a big oil state-controlled company, is the major producer, but only for internal usage. We don't have in Brazil liquefying of hydrogen yet. The gas is transported by truck in pressurized cylinders to consumption. And the main applications for hydrogen in Brazil are petrochemical for refining of oil products, steel industry for tempering furnaces, food industry for hydrogenation, for example, for margarine, glass industry for tempering furnaces, and also thermoelectric power plant for turbine cooling. But there is no commercial use for hydrogen for energy purposes yet. So this is where we started looking at it differently. And we have been discussing hydrogen in a more systematic way since 2021 and its role in our energy transition strategy. So last year, we published our 30-year energy expansion plan, already showing hydrogen as one promising disruptive technology. In February 2021, the National Council for Energy Policy also defined hydrogen as one of our key strategic areas for public and publicly oriented innovation investments. After that, the Energy Research Office published a scientific report on the basis for a national strategy on hydrogen. And as mentioned by Bahal, in August last year, the National Council for Energy Policy established about 50 directives for our hydrogen national program. So when we look to hydrogen in Brazil, we are think, of course, about exports, but how to foster the domestic market for hydrogen in terms of supply and demand. So we know, and Bahao already mentioned, that we have an abundance of competitive clean energy, electricity specifically, so that we know that we are going to play an important role as a low carbon hydrogen exporter. But we have to think how to develop the market in Brazil, looking into this big country with several natural characteristics. So we have weather, we have soil, we have several abundant natural resources, and we have to see how we connect all these small markets and resources to develop a low carbon hydrogen market. And so where do we see potentials in Brazil? We think about the demand for fertilizers, thinking about green ammonia, for example, but also about the production of advanced biofuels like HVO and biojet fuel. We think, of course, like other countries, in energy storage in case of variable power generation. We think in using hydrogen as well in fuel cells for light and heavy vehicles. Uh, and one of the things that we have been discussing with industry is coming at some point to the green steel. So using hydrogen for direct reduction of steel. And so when we think about hydrogen, we think about the policy, but on the other hand, we have to help industries to undergo their energy transition strategies as well. And of course, in green methanol for biodiesel production. And of course, as mentioned, we know in Brazil that in energy we have to depend on their private-led investments, and we have seen private actors showing interest in developing green hydrogen for export at this point, and looking in other routes as well. We know, and it's very important that we keep fostering our international cooperation on this a bit later. And so another point that is very important is that we continue to apply resources for R&D to decarbonize our energy systems, and hydrogen will take an important part in this as well. So we are undergoing a power sector reform, which is marked by a major integration of renewables, and the Ministry of Mines and Energy, together with the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation, are building a shared government structure on science, technology and innovation policies for the energy and mining sectors. We have to think also about mineral resources for energy transition. The Ministry of Science and Technology has already started discussing with the Ministry of Education regarding capacity building for the hydrogen industry. And as mentioned before, in February 2001, the National Council for Energy Policy has published this resolution orienting the regulatory agencies in the power sector and in the oil and gas sector to prioritize the destination of regulated R&D resources to seven themes related to energy transition, one of them being hydrogen. And we took part last year in the UN high-level dialogue on energy, and Brazil was a champion on energy transition. And we presented then an energy compact, so a voluntary commitment in hydrogen, and it's based on or our compact or our voluntary commitment is looking forward to create knowledge in hydrogen in Brazil based on three pillars, being one of them the investments, R&D investments. So we are building an R&D policy together with both regulatory agencies, the regulatory agency for the oil and gas sector and for the power sector, to call for projects for hydrogen, I think by beginning of next year. And when we think about a roadmap to decarbonize economies and the role that hydrogen can play, we are seeing several countries developing their policies or strategies. And as Bahal mentioned, we are working on our national program for hydrogen, which we see as a living or organic public policy. So we published the directives last year, and they are based on three interdependent pillars. So we know that we have to develop public policies, technology, and the market at the same time. And the directives are gathered around six axes. So one being, of course, the strengthening of technological bases, the training and capacity building, then energy planning, the development of legal and regulatory framework, market growth and competitiveness, and of course international cooperation. And now at this point we are designing a multi-stakeholder government structure so that we can work together with private sector, with academia and research to fill in the blanks and develop a comprehensive market for hydrogen in Brazil. What are our goals? They are to gain scale and reduce costs, and of course to build infrastructures that enable the whole country to benefit from a hydrogen economy. And we are also focused on disseminating information about hydrogen, reducing information asymmetries and transaction costs. So there is the designing of a platform for green hydrogen through our cooperation with Germany, and we are to design a comprehensive platform for hydrogen based on our voluntary commitment established in the dialogue last year at the United Nations. And when we think about the roles for the private sector and partnerships, the National Program for Hydrogen is paying attention to the internalization of value chains, also developing an internal market for products, goods, and services linked to hydrogen, but also, on the other hand, to make Brazil participate in the global hydrogen value chain. And what we are witnessing, when we are accompanying all the projects that are being announced by state, federal governments, they are already developing their strategies, thinking about these entrepreneurial partnerships. And to conclude, what we see as a major contribution of international cooperation for the development of the hydrogen market and industry in Brazil, of course, as Bahal mentioned, for continuing technological development, the International Energy Agency's Net Zero report stated that 50% of the technology needed for net zero by 2015 hasn't been developed yet, or is in its and theirs early stage of development. Another issue that is very important for us when we think about a global decarbonized economy is to work together in taxonomy, in certifications for low hydrogen. So Brazil has what we call a colorblind approach. We are not really linked or based on any specific route. We know that together the world is going to prefer low carbon energy resources. So we have to think about certification and taxonomy for low carbon hydrogen. And of course, we utmost welcome resources for project development. We know that we are starting with a lot of pilot projects, but this may gain scale, and we will need resources for this. So I think I have covered a bit of the issues that we are looking into right now. And I'm very pleased to be here and participate in the coming discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Agnes, for providing this overview on policy with regard to hydrogen. And it's obviously very interesting to see how the country is moving towards having a more clear goal in the development of this industry and in partnership. So and given the resources that the country has, it has the potential to be a very competitive producer of hydrogen, low carbon hydrogen, and of course also take advantage of all the innovation that comes with this new industry. Speaking of innovation, I would like to invite André. André Clark has been very vocal with regard to the opportunities of hydrogen. But I also would like to hear from your side what gaps you see. How do you see the state of this market? Because we have many countries establishing strategies, including Brazil, willing to be part of this new industry that is to be disruptive in the way we have the energy systems. What is your perspective, Andrea, with regard to the current state, and what is the roadmap for us to move forward?
Thank you, Tiago, for the opportunity. First of all, just to congratulate Ambassador Jaguaribe and Apex for this event. Please, ladies and gentlemen, these three people here, Tiago, Carlos, and Agnes, are a policy reference to us all. So it's a privilege to be here with you. They are directed by dialogue. They listen. There's no reason to be vocal if there's nobody listening, and they are powerful policymakers, as you could see from Agnes. It's been a privilege to work together that way. As I told Ambassador Jaguaribe, the German-Brazilian relationship, history and present, is dense. It's dense in academia and science. It's dense in culture. It's dense in the fight for democracy. It's dense in business and the history of its own industry. Siemens and Siemens Energy itself is present in Brazil for 140 years. So we've been participating and privileged in participating for so long in this partnership. And it keeps giving birth to a number of very important outcomes. The next one, the now one, is energy. Imagine a full trade of energy between Brazil and Germany at scale. I think that Tiago, in his opening speech, that differentiated the Brazilian case. It's one of the few countries at scale on renewable and green hydrogen. Also in oil and gas now, right? So what's going on in Brazil in this exact moment? And I think it's quite relevant to remember that. Brazil is about to become the 5th largest oil and gas exporter in the planet. This oil is explored 300 kilometers away from the coast, 7,000 meters below the surface of water, and it's one of the most decarbonized oils in the planet, just after the Middle Eastern oil. And it has been growing production precipitously. So it is a player now. Also, Brazil is the 4th largest onshore wind power generation. And it is, according to IRENA, the lowest marginal cost producer. Why? Because the usage factor of a wind turbine in the Brazilian winds, particularly in the Northeast, is 60%. Other regions in the world are happy when they reach 30. This makes the space extremely competitive. We've been seeing renewable energy in auctions going on for below the $25 per megawatt. This is very important. Extremely competitive renewable energy now. Further, Brazil, as Tiago told us, has a hydropower energy matrix. In hydropower, in the rainy season, there's energy being produced, converted out of the reservoir, not generating energy because the network doesn't take it. So we have, throughout the wet season, energy at zero marginal cost now. This is the reason why renewable energy is so competitive in Brazil. Further, in Brazil, the wind blows at night. With the expansion of both utility and distributed solar energy, this will get more competitive as we go on. All of these ideas, you can read on Tiago's EPE reports. It's open to the public, and I recommend whoever is studying in Brazil, read those EPE reports. Finally, the regulatory model in Brazil allows for the private sector to play extensively. Just recently, in the last year or so, 87% of the wind power expansion came from bilateral power purchase agreements without government auctions. There's a huge free market going on right now. This makes the country ready for international partnerships or power purchase agreements regarding hydrogen or the likes immediately at a huge scale. This is what we're seeing. The first project, and we are extremely involved with about 6 really large-scale ones, are the ones who consider 4 players together. Which are they? First, a very large renewable energy producer who's willing to, burst the ceiling of the local energy demand. They want to export energy to save. Second, a off-taker of hydrogen, producer of fertilizer, green ammonia, hydrogenated vegetable oils, HVO, right? It's a new generation of biodiesel, truck and bus manufacturers, and steel makers. This is the second composition. The industrial gas player usually makes a good formation of an investment group and also a technology provider such as ourselves. These are the characteristics of the projects that are being born right now. If I had to say, our calculations are showing that by 2024-25, we will see the first really large green hydrogen facilities coming online in the coastal sides of Brazil with a certain certainty. It's amazing how these projects are progressing. Some of them with the help and assistance of the German diplomatic community, and it's quite promising. We are quite bullish about these projects. These are, in our view, the first wave of projects. These are the first waves that define the usage, the offtake of hydrogen. And this, Tiago, is the key aspect that we need to develop to reach our decarbonization strategy, both national and international. This is where we need to scale up. We need off-takers, and we need the logistics on both sides, Brazil to export, Europe to import, and decide on the standard of that. Are we exporting green ammonia? Are we exporting hydrogen itself? What will be the base so that we can actually scale up? From the size of the interest of both domestic and international capitals in this game, I would say that this is the next challenge, and this is where the countries, particularly at government level, should make an accord on how this logistics and the offtakes will actually be detailed, the infrastructure of transportation. This is it. Those are my first remarks. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. It's really interesting to hear you speak about large projects, and you're very convincing of how real they can be. So it shows the confidence in the technology, shows the confidence in the market, and what we need is now is to have the coordination to have supply and demand growing at the same pace, so that we can have and establish a growing supply chain and demand and off takers to get this market growing and getting stronger with time. I have a number of. I would like to come back with this issue. Is it about mandates? Is it about long-term PPAs? Is it about so how can we move in that direction? But before, I would like to close the round of with our panelists. And next, I would like to invite Mike to join us in this conversation. And Mike, could you tell us a little bit about your research, and how do you see the hydrogen market and the use of this technology? How do you see that from your perspective, and some of the challenges or opportunities that you would like to highlight in this first round?
Thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to speak here today. I highly appreciate the privilege to be invited and to bring in the German and European perspective into this dialogue. And of course, I want to start with a European perspective right now. Europe has set itself a goal of becoming climate neutral by 2050. Germany even wants to achieve this by 2045. And this means that in less than 25 or 30 years, we will have to completely do without fossil fuels. Today, around 80% of the primary energy consumption still come from fossil fuels in Germany and Europe. So we all are convinced that such a development is not possible without the widespread use of climate neutral hydrogen. Particularly in the energy-intensive industries, steel industry, chemical industry, cement industry, paper industry, glass industry, but also in the mobility sector, decarbonisation can only be achieved through the use of green hydrogen. And the earlier climate neutrality is to be achieved, the higher the required share of green hydrogen and its synthetic downstream products, such as green ammonia, green methanol, and green hydrocarbons for aviation and international maritime shipping, because then there is less time to develop technological alternatives. This applies not only to Germany and Europe, but also worldwide. And we've already heard about Brazil, that we are in the same game. So they are also thinking about decarbonizing those industries with hydrogen. And this is the same strategy that Germany and Europe has. But until February 2024, until February the 24th of 2022, the transition path to a climate neutral economic system in Germany focused on natural gas as a more climate friendly transition technology for industry, the power sector, and heat supply for buildings, in combination with the so-called magic formula being hydrogen ready, which means that the technologies to be installed should first use natural gas, but already be designed in a way that they can later be converted to hydrogen when a world market for green hydrogen has been established, when solutions for transporting hydrogen over long distances have been found, and when green hydrogen is available in sufficient quantities. But with the Russian attack on Ukraine, this bridge of natural gas to the climate neutral era is no longer viable. Germany and Europe now need much larger quantities of green hydrogen much earlier to secure their energy supply. And from my point of view, this is where a very large opportunity opens up for Brazil. With a renewable generation potential that exceeds Brazil's projected 2050 energy demand by a factor of 17, and a power generation which is already at 85% renewable, Brazil can, from my point of view, very quickly develop additional renewable power generation capacity for climate neutral hydrogen production. And with an average renewable electricity production cost of $30 per megawatt hour, as was already told by Andre, for projects in the year 2021 in Brazil, green hydrogen should already be very cost effective to produce. And for the future, Bloomberg New Energy Finance forecasts that Brazil will be the country with the lowest hydrogen production costs in every place in the world. So this will provide a very large competitive advantage for the Brazilian economy, especially when you look at green mining or green steel and green chemicals like ammonia and methanol. The use of green hydrogen offers, from my point of view, new options for value creation for the Brazilian economy. The goals of climate neutral production at the corporate level, and we already mentioned that there are several companies in Germany taking this at very high importance, will force the use of climate neutral primary products in the medium term. And this can also be a great opportunity for the Brazilian companies to position themselves and generate more value-added shares in the future. And also the opportunity for Brazil as a hydrogen exporter to enter in a long-term energy partnership with Europe is at least as large. Germany has already created a kind of global marketplace by linking supply and demand of green hydrogen, green ammonia, and green methanol with the H2Global platform. And this concept is designed in a way that any additional cost for the green characteristics of the product, the green hydrogen or the green ammonia or the green methanol, are initially borne by Germany. So in this way, Brazil could secure sales potential as a first mover. The first auctions on this H2Global platform will take place in this year, 2022, and the first delivery is planned for 2024. And maybe with the projects that Andre already mentioned, there's a possibility to take part in this H2Global platform and become the first one to deliver green hydrogen products to Germany for Brazil. Of course, this must be completed by the development of the appropriate infrastructures for hydrogen, ammonia, and methanol exports. Investments in ports, infrastructure, and shipping fleets must be made by both partners, Brazil and also in Europe, and we need the money to invest here. But I think that with the long-standing very good relations, especially at the corporate level, many German companies have production sites in Brazil. An ideal precondition for a joint success story in green hydrogen is already in place. And so the green hydrogen future can become reality as quickly as possible. And I think that from my point of view, the most important things to do as next steps is scaling up electrolysis technology and just ramping up the market in the green hydrogen production and also the production of green ammonia and methanol to make the next steps into a climate neutral future. Thank you so much for this time.
Thank you, Maike, and thanks for making sense of the current geopolitical situation and the impact it has on the energy transition. And I think you made it very clear that energy transition is hand in hand with energy security, and accelerating these policies in your perspective, and that's a way of reducing vulnerabilities in the current moment. Thank you for that, and I would like now to invite Professor Paulo Emílio for joining this conversation now. Paulo, you have been in contact with so many companies, and you have also been part of many technical discussions, research. So how do you see the current moment, and how do you see the companies in the value chain of hydrogen really are they ready to deliver this ambition that we have heard from Andrea and Maike?
Okay, Thiago, thank you very much for your introduction and your question. And it's a pleasure for me to be here to speak a little bit about the Hydrogen Association in Brazil. And I thank you very much, the organizers, for this opportunity. And I would say that it's much easier to speak now because of all, let's say, inputs we have had before here. So I'm going to begin telling you that Brazil has been investing in research and development on hydrogen and fuel cell areas for a long time. For example, the first 1 kilowatt fuel cell was developed in Brazil in the 1970s. So after that, we had an important effort, policies effort, as Agnes mentioned in the beginning of the 2000s. And Brazil was also a co-founder of the International Partnership for Hydrogen and Fuel Cells in the Economy. And the Brazilian Hydrogen Association is a very young association. It was founded only 5 years ago within an academic environment, but with a challenge to reach the industry, to work with the industry in Brazil. And the result was fantastic. So I'm going to ask you, please, to put the first of the 2 slides that I brought to show here to you. You see, these are the Brazilian Hydrogen Association members today. In only 5 years, the association has more than 40 industries that are actively participating in all activities that are being developed in this area. And I'm going to mention a few of them here. I can't, mention all of them. But for example, Tupi is financing ABH2 to act as an accredited organization at the Brazilian Codes and Standards Association. This is very important because we need to establish codes and standards for the various technologies that we're going to use in the country. In addition to that, recently, ABA2 has organized and held 2 events. One was a Brazilian Congress on hydrogen, and the other one was an international Congress on hydrogen held in partnership with New Energy Events. And in these events, we had the participation, active participation, for example, of Trent, Rossi, Watanabe, Toyota, Air Liquide, White Martins, Lind, Air Products, SPIC, Engie, AES Brazil, New Energia, Iberdrola, and Norsul, Hydrobras. So one thing that we could, let's say, ask is, why are all these companies so interested in this hydrogen energy area in Brazil? Part of this answer has already been answered by the previous presentations, But I'm going to give you some further information on that. And for that, I would like to have the next slide, please. With this next slide, we are going to speak on the potential that Brazil has to produce hydrogen in the country. Would you please get me the next slide? Okay. Okay, thank you very much. So as it has been mentioned here, Brazil produces oil and gas, and obviously the hydrogen that is produced in Brazil, mostly captive hydrogen in a few industries, is for the uses already mentioned in the Brazilian industry and produced out of natural gas. And in the future, Brazil can also produce hydrogen from natural gas with CO2 capture and storage, or even with experiences that are already in place in Brazil nowadays, like to use the CO2 in enhanced oil recovery. Brazil has one of the biggest experiences in the world in this area. But what is remarkable regarding hydrogen in Brazil is the great potential to produce renewable hydrogen. So, for example, nowadays in Brazil, the production of biogas is very intense. We have like 640 industries producing biogas all through the country nowadays. And this expectation is that in 2040, we will reach something like 80 giganormal cubic meters of biogas being produced in the country, which could be responsible for 11% of the whole hydrogen produced in the world today. And with something very particular and interesting is that when we produce hydrogen out of natural gas, we do the water vapor reforming of natural gas. But upon utilizing biogas, it is possible to perform the dry reforming of biogas. And this is a condition very important in the sense that if CO2 is captured, then we may have negative emissions because the carbon that we have in biogas or in other biomasses didn't come from underground. So it is the result of photosynthesis that was made before in many cases. We also have a great availability of biomasses in Brazil because Brazil is an agro-industrial country. So several types of waste biomasses can be used to produce hydrogen in Brazil, and also ethanol, because Brazil is a major world player on the ethanol industry. And ethanol itself is a hydrogen carrier, is a product that can be used to produce ethanol, but there is also sub-products in the production of ethanol that can be advantageously used to produce hydrogen in Brazil. In addition to that, there is something very new and not very well known yet by many, which is natural hydrogen. Yes, we have hydrogen in the earth, in the subsurface of our territory. And this has been proved already in several areas in Brazil. So it is very likely that in the future we will have natural hydrogen wells in Brazil, in the same way that we have natural gas wells in Brazil nowadays. Most of them will be on the continent. Well, we produce a lot of gas today offshore. Brazil has a certain geothermal potential, which has not been, let's say, explored yet. And we also are developing ocean energy to produce electricity, with which we can also produce hydrogen by water electrolysis. And experiences were already made in the Northeast in Brazil. And now a new effort is being done in the Southeast of Brazil. But what is really remarkable when we talk about producing hydrogen out of water electrolysis is the great potential Brazil has for wind energy and solar energy. This has been already mentioned here, especially in the Brazilian Northeast and in the south of the country. But something special is the possibility to have the hybrid utilization of solar and wind energy in such a way that one technology can stabilize the intermittence of the other one. So this is a very nice prospect for producing hydrogen in Brazil. Of course, we also produce most of our electricity from hydroelectric power plants. So we also have this input of electricity to produce hydrogen. But one, let's say, different approach that we have in Brazil with respect to other countries is that in addition to the effort to produce hydrogen utilizing water electrolysis, we have a variety of possibilities to produce renewable hydrogen in Brazil, utilizing also biomasses and, in the future, natural hydrogen. So this great potential that Brazil has to produce hydrogen is being developed. And if we see in the map that I'm showing this presentation, the states that are highlighted with a darker green are states that have already announced hydrogen hubs in Brazil. Some of these hubs are directed to produce hydrogen from water electrolysis. Others are working on green ammonia or the utilization of hydrogen in the transport sector. So what is important in Brazil is that hydrogen is being viewed as a commodity to be used in the country to help our decarbonization, which is already important, and also for exportation. So these are the main possibilities that I would like to comment about hydrogen production in Brazil and the enormous possibilities that we have in the country, and that we are very much open for international collaboration, and especially this event made in collaboration with Germany. I think it's very important because we have several Germany company installed and working in Brazil for several years. And I think this is a good starting point for us to collaborate with Germany. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paulo Emilio. So I think so far we have seen from your comments and presentation the diversity of resources and how we can combine these resources to provide, flexible and reliable supply of hydrogen. We heard from Mike this connection between the current status of energy policy in Germany and research and the ambition on the German side, and how we can work together to connect what Brazil and Germany can do together to scale up this market. And we heard from Andre how companies are ready to put in place investments, work to establish the supply chains, make the technologies deliver the ambition that we have seen. And Agnes started speaking about the policies in place in Brazil, so and providing this overall perspective. So to finish, we have. I would like to close this with inviting Carlos Alexandre to come back to the policy side of this equation, and here and ask you to close this panel, Carlos, by trying to connect and you have been leading the working group with Germany on co-leading the working group on with Germany on hydrogen, so that we can accelerate that with the industry. So how would you, from a policy perspective, your remarks, so that we can close this round of the round of this panel?
Thank you, Thiago. Well, it's always a bad position after several experts to summarize what they did, what they said. But I would like to emphasize and to highlight the importance of the collaboration between Brazil and Germany. As you have the opportunity to hear, Agnes mentioned that one of the axes of our national program is related to collaboration. And it's very, very important to mention that Brazil and Germany has a long-lasting collaboration and partnership in terms of energy. And this is very important and crucial for this moment in terms of enhancing and developing our policies related to hydrogen or green hydrogen. And also important to mention that more than 60% of companies in Germany that deals with hydrogen have subsidiaries in our country. And more than 95% of companies that are included in the Global Hydrogen Council also have subsidiaries in our country. So it's clear for us the necessity, the need of collaboration between Brazil and Germany to enhance and improve our market of green hydrogen. That was my final comments related to this market, and I'm looking forward to see many companies investing in our country, so that we can once more collaborate to a mutual goal.
Thank you, Kalex. We are sharp. We have to finish now, but I would like to hear from my colleagues. Any very brief final comment? Anyone has a firing comment? Andre, so you have 30 seconds.
Just my only comment is, think of how important this is for the Brazilian-German relationship, and why not to say the Mercosur European Union trade agreement. Imagine if we start trading energy at scale in this partnership, what the world can be. Thank you, Thiago.
Thank you, Andrea. I think what you highlight is the importance of energy in our relations and the importance in trade, and how this is actually being part of the Brazil-Germany relation, and we should continue strengthening that. I think that's a very clear message, and thank you for taking the time and making that comment. And I think it's a perfect way to close this session. As we see, hydrogen is a key topic for the German energy policy. It's been also on top of the agenda in Brazil. So thank you to all of our panelists for this contribution to the hydrogen policy discussion. And we'll be soon back to our next panel, which is focused on biofuels, the role of modern bioenergy and advanced biofuels in a net zero future. We'll be back in a minute. Thank you. Okay, welcome back to our event, Energy Transition Challenges and Opportunities in Brazil. And we are now starting the second panel of the day, a very special set of guests that we have here, distinguished panelists that will join us in a minute. So this second panel is the role of Bion energy and advanced biofuels in a net zero future. So the IPCC and the International Energy Agency have called our attention for the need for sustainable bioenergy to be deployed so that we can reach our net zero pledges and net zero ambitions. And in the case of Brazil, Brazil has a long history of policies towards bioenergy. And more recently, it has enhanced its policies with the Renova Bio, the National Biofuels Policy, and the Fuel of the Future program, both of them really addressing the need for sustainable bioenergy to deliver the impact that we need in replacing fossil fuels in the transport sector, in industry, and also in the power sector. Just to give you an idea, sugarcane biomass is responsible for almost 20% of energy supply in Brazil in 2020. So that's a huge contribution. And for this reason, we will have this panel to discuss with distinguished experts and CEOs from policy making side, from the private sector, their perspectives on the roadmap to continue developing that. And also we'll have the chance to discuss how Brazil and Germany are working together and can benefit from the potential of bioenergy and sustainable biofuels. I would like to invite our panelists today. First, I would like to mention that we'll have a keynote presentation by Pietro Mendes, director at the, actually he's just appointed Deputy Secretary of Oil, Natural Gas and Biofuels at the Ministry of Mines and Energy of Brazil. He was previously director at the Biofuels Department at the Ministry, and he's originally from the National Regulatory Agency for Oil, Natural Gas and Biofuels. We are also having here today Eduardo Leão, Executive Director at UNICA, the Sugar Industry Association. He's very experienced and very renowned in Brazil for his experience, including, and he was a senior economist and regional program leader in environment and agriculture in the World Bank. So thank you for joining us in this panel. We also have here with us Professor Gonçalo Pereira, he's a professor at Unicamp University, head of the Genomics and Bioenergy Lab of the PhD program in bioenergy. And we also have Gerolf Burkeler. I hope I have pronounced that correctly. He's since April 2021, he's at the German Bioenergy Association, BBE, as a managing director, and he was he's also very he has been working as a speaker for climate protection and sustainability. So also thank you so much for joining us. Let me skip for this moment the keynote presentation by Pietro, because apparently he had some problem connecting. So I asked our team in the backstage to try to figure that out. But I would like to start by inviting from the industry, Eduardo Leão. Thank you again for joining us. And I would like to hear from you. This is a very challenging time. We have been discussing how to balance or how to combine the imperatives of energy transition and energy security. And we have seen from Brazilian experience how bioenergy gives a critical contribution to energy security. So how do you see this moment? How do you see the policies that are being implemented and put in place, such as the National Biofuels Policy, the Fuel of the Future, the blending mandates? So how do you see the role of biofuels in this moment, and how we can, and what kind of challenges do you see ahead? How can we move forward? So just to kick off this conversation, Eduardo, we are happy to hear the view of the industry, the perspective of the industry in Brazil.
Thank you, Bahal. Good afternoon to those who are in Europe. Good morning to colleagues here in Brazil. If you allow me, I have prepared a set of slides for my initial remarks, and I would ask if someone from the organization could help me with that. Okay, thank you very much. Well, my name is Eduardo. I'm the executive director of UNICA. UNICA is the Brazilian Sugarcane Industry and Bioenergy Association. I'm currently representing our president, Mr. Evandro Gussi, who unfortunately, due to a last-minute commitment, the Brazilian government could not participate. But I'll try to bring some information regarding our industry here in Brazil. The first slide, if you could please pass, summarize the importance of ethanol in our light vehicle fleet in Brazil. Ethanol represents almost half of total use of fuels in our light vehicle fleet. And the major benefit from this use can be seen in the next slide, where you can see how much this large use of ethanol into our, next please. The use of this large use of ethanol in our vehicle fleet represents to the decarbonization agenda. If you look at the last 20 years, when we started using the flex fuel vehicles in Brazil, this has allowed to avoid the emission of 600 million tons of CO2, which would represent 4 billion trees to achieve the same reduction. And how this can be done? Next, please. Next. One more. Thank you. So this is possible to be done because ethanol can reduce up to 90% of greenhouse gas emissions when we compare to gasoline. And this is considering all the life cycle analysis and also including the indirect land use change caused by all the production of sugarcane to produce ethanol here in Brazil. Next, please. And this amazing performance of ethanol, substituting almost 50% of the gasoline here in the country, is being done using less than 1% of the Brazilian territory. Less than 1% that's used to produce sugarcane of our territory allows us to substitute almost 50% of current fuels used in light vehicle fleet. Next, please. Another important figure to this agenda is how far we are from. You can see that 92% of our production in the center-southern part of Brazil is 2,500 kilometers from the Amazon. This would be equivalent to a situation, for instance, if you produce sugarcane in Berlin, Germany, and the Amazon area would start in Madrid, for instance. This is more or less the distance of where we produce sugarcane and where the Amazon area is. And also important to mention that based on our Renovable program, which is the biofuels program here in Brazil, that for sure will be explained by Mr. Pietro, does not allow us to cause any kind of deforestation. You cannot deforestate any tree. If you do that, if you suppress any tree, you will be out of the program and would be not allowed to benefit from the carbon credit that is envisaged in our biofuels policy. Next, please. But the ethanol has not only provided benefit from the decarbonization side, it also has provided an enormous benefit regarding the improvement of the air quality in our large cities. Just an example, São Paulo, many of you may have been here in São Paulo and have seen the large traffic jam that we have in the city. São Paulo is the fourth largest city in terms of population. And when you look at the current air quality, you can see that São Paulo ranks as the 1,779 position in terms of the most polluted cities in the world. So this is basically due to the large use of ethanol, which is more than 60% in the city. And to coming to my conclusion, if you can please move to the next slide. I would like to mention that this discussion of the mobility is so important in the decarbonization agenda. Because first, we represent the transport sector represents 25% of total emission of CO2 in the world. 1/4 comes from the transport sector. And second, the situation will get even more complicated over the next years. We envisage that in the next 2 decades, we should double the current fleet in the world. So we have to find solutions to decarbonize this sector. And there are many solutions, multiple solutions for that. One is the combustion engine, as we know it today, that can be used with ethanol blended into the gasoline, as we do here in Brazil. In Brazil, all petrol has 27% of ethanol. We also use 100% pure in the flex fuel vehicles. So combustion is a solution to decarbonize the transport sector in the very short term. But we also have other alternatives. The hybrid flex, the hybrid vehicles that can run on ethanol, as we already have some vehicles, some models running in Brazil. Hybrid vehicles, a combination of electric with combustion engines, but running on ethanol. The third one was the one that was already mentioned in the first panel regarding the fuel cell, that you can generate electricity inside the car on board using ethanol from which you extract the hydrogen to generate the power to the electric vehicle. But you also have other alternatives using ethanol, for instance, generating the electricity for the plug-in cars that run on electricity. They can use this electricity from sugarcane technologies such as biogas, biomethane. These are also solutions that are already in place here in Brazil, and we are working on to expanding this alternative. And to conclude, as I have just mentioned in this slide, in the next one, we would like to leave this message to all of you, that we understand that we are not the solution, but we are for sure part of the solution. To prevent global warming, the world must face challenging goals. And for this, we depend on complementary solutions and every possible efforts. So we are part of the solution. With this, I'd like to finish for now, and we'll be glad to continue the discussion afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eduardo. It's interesting to see this, to have this overview from the sugarcane industry and biofuel industry. And I can quickly react to your presentation by stating that, first of all, when you look into the future, you see a diversity of technologies and solutions to deliver decarbonization. It's not just one technology, it's not just one solution, but it's a diversity of solutions that will coexist in this environment. And the second thing is that the sugarcane industry is not stuck in the past. It's looking into the future towards sustainability patterns, sustainability issues, but also to new technologies to transform the industry in the process of energy transition. So I think it's very interesting that you share this perspective from the sugarcane industry in Brazil. Thank you. Hopefully we can come back to explore more details of that. Now we have Pietro connected. Pietro, we expect you to provide us some keynote about the state of the energy policies with regard to bioenergy, biofuels. And so we are really excited to hear from you. What's next? What is the ministry working on? What kind of policies you would like to highlight for us at this point? So thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Bahal. It's a great pleasure to stay here to join Berlin Energy Transition Dialogue, this side event. And with this experts in this dialogue, Professor Gonçalo, Mr. Eduardo Leão, and Gerald Butler. And first of all, I would like to say that biofuels are very important for energy security, to reduce import of fossil fuels and to reduce carbon intensity of our fuel matrix. And we really believe that, as you told before, that biofuels can coexist with electrification, and we can combine the best of biofuels and electrification process. We are, as you said in the beginning of this event, the second largest producer and consumer market of biofuels in the world, and the fourth largest automotive fuel market in the world. At COP26, Brazil has showed the intention to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 50% below 2005 levels in 2030, and to become carbon neutral in 2050. And of course, we need to have a huge spectrum of solutions. To promote the use of biofuels, Brazil has three key policies: mandates for biofuels, that is the most traditional way to stimulate the use of biofuels in Brazil; Renewables, that I will explain further; and Fuel of the Future. In Brazil, when you go to the gas station, it's not possible to buy just fossil fuels, liquid fossil fuels. We have in our gasoline 27% of anhydrous ethanol, E100, hydrous ethanol, and diesel B, that nowadays we have 10% of biodiesel. Last week, we launched measures to stimulate production of biomethane from waste. We expect to increase our production from 400,000 cubic meters per day to 2.4 million cubic meters per day of biomethane in 2027. Last year, we used more than 27 billion liters of ethanol and 6.4 billion liters of biodiesel. And as Eduardo showed us, we can prove that we are producing in a sustainable way because it's not permitted to use areas that comes from deforestation process. Renewable is the main regulated market of decarbonization credits in we commercialize CBIOs. CBIOs is equivalent to 1 ton of CO2 equivalent avoided into the atmosphere by the use of biofuels and inspired in low carbon fuel standard from California. We have submitted the target of Renewable to reduce 10% of our carbon intensity to United Nations high-level dialogue on energy until 2030, considering 2018 as a baseline. We are moving from 73 grams CO2 equivalent per megajoule to 66 grams CO2 equivalent per megajoule in 2030. That becomes Brazil one of the most cleanest fuel matrix of the world. In 2021, we avoided emissions of 24 million CO2 equivalent using biofuels, and the market commercialized at stock exchange because all the commercialization of CBIOs happens at stock exchange. More than 1 billion reais, almost 200 million US dollars of decarbonization credits were commercialized at stock exchange. And we are going further. In Fuel of the Future program, we are working to integrate public policy related to the automotive industry and fuels. And what are the base of the integration of policy related to fuels and to the automotive industry? Is the life cycle assessment from well to the wheel, and not just from the tank to the wheel, to evaluate sustainability of mobility. We want to consider to evaluate sustainable mobility the step of generation energy too. Our strategy to Fuel of the Future, we want to develop an industry in Brazil for low carbon fuels in aviation and maritime industry, because these sectors are considered hard to abate, and so we need to have low carbon fuels to decarbonize these sectors. And according to the study of Roundtable of Sustainable Biomaterial, RSB from Europe, Brazil has the potential to produce 90 billion liters of sustainable fuel, SAF, mainly from sugarcane waste, more than 6 billion liters. It's more than our consumption of jet fuel. So Brazil is recognized one of the countries that can export sustainable aviation fuel. We are working to develop a legal framework for carbon capture and storage, CCS. In Brazil nowadays, there's not regulatory authority for this activity, and CCS is very important to reduce carbon intensity of energy. We believe that we need to have a portfolio of solutions to promote sustainable mobility and consider energy generation too. When we consider this step, biofuels are competitive with electric vehicles to reduce GHG, and we believe that we need to have both solutions and they are complementary. We will not have a single solution. For example, for countries of South region like Brazil and India, makes sense to use biofuels because we can produce these fuels in a sustainable way, and we can combine with electrification like hybrid vehicles and fuel cell, where the source of hydrogen can be ethanol or biomethane. When you consider LCA from well to the wheel, a hybrid vehicle with ethanol emits from 5 to 35 grams CO2 equivalent per kilometer, and an electric vehicle in Europe from 10 to 130 grams CO2 equivalent per kilometer, depending on the source of energy. So if we are sustainable and we can prove that our production of biofuels is sustainable. Why not to continue to use bioenergy, and why not to export these models for other countries and help, for example, countries like India and Thailand that has a great production of sugarcane, to increase the ethanol content and to promote sustainability in the mobility. Thank you, Baral.
Thank you, Pietro, and congratulations for the work done in shaping these policies with regard to bioenergy in general. And I think very much bringing innovative policy design into the market in Brazil. And I'm really glad to see that there has been a lot of confidence in the robustness of these policies. So we have had the first 2 years of full implementation of Renova Bio policy and the CBio markets, and it's not an easy process after the pandemic and the current energy prices going up worldwide. So, but as far as I have seen, these policies have proven resilient, very resilient to be fair. And and it's really exciting also to see the fuel of the future with a number of ministries working in coordination to deliver the enhancement in the policies and the regulation. So just quick reaction to your keynote. So thank you for that. And now I would like to invite Gerolf to join us in this conversation. And because, I mean, bioenergy is something that every Brazilian knows a lot about, and it's part of our daily life. But in Europe, it's not so obvious as part of the energy transition. Many times when we discuss in international forum, bioenergy is not even mentioned in many of these forums. So I'm really interested to hear from you from the German Bioenergy Association. How do you see this the role of bioenergy in the transition, both in Germany but worldwide? How do you see the prospects for sustainability and bioenergy as we move ahead in the energy transition? Thank you. Gerolf, I believe you are muted. Can you check on that? Or maybe it's the I don't think we can hear you. Maybe it's the headphones. Gerolf, can you try again?
Can you hear me now? Oh,
Yes, now. Yeah.
Okay, so sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly now. Move ahead.
Okay, so sorry for the connection problems. So thanks for the question, and I want to bring in the German perspective into the discussion. So just 3 points that I want to make. The first one is that also in Germany, of course, biofuels are a huge part and an important part of the energy discussion and of the climate policies. So, for example, in 2020, sustainable biofuels saved roughly 13 million tons of CO2 equivalents in the transport sector and provided roughly 90% of all renewable energy used in the transport. So without biofuels, there wouldn't have been much effort in achieving climate targets in the transport. Second point I wanted to make is that also in future, biofuels will, of course, play an important role in achieving climate and energy targets in the transport sector. Even if we are going the direction of electrification of the transport, the German government has the target of having 15 million electric vehicles on the road in 2030. But when we know that we have 49 million cars now on the streets with combustion engine, this leaves roughly 35 million cars that are still using combustion engines in 2030. So, and it is clear that all these cars that run on combustion engines will also have to play their role in climate mitigation and transport sector. And the last point that has gained increasing attention in the last days and weeks due to the war in Ukraine is the role for security of energy supply. So we see that large parts of fossil fuels come from unstable and insecure world regions, and of course also biofuels produced domestically or sourced from stable world regions, being it other neighboring EU countries or other stable parts of the world, of course also play an important role for securing energy supply and making not only Germany but also the EU and all nations more independent from those unstable world regions. So from my perspective, it is clear that of course biofuels will have to play an important role in securing energy supply in the future and also provide climate mitigation and renewable energy for the transport sector in the future.
Gerolf, may I just still keep with you and hear about how do you see the role of new technologies? So we have had in Brazil the second plant for a second generation ethanol, and we are discussing and the world is discussing new generation of biofuels. How much is German companies, German institutes of research are involved in building that?
Yeah, also in Germany, we see a gradual shift towards second generation biofuels being produced from residues and waste. And this is also due to the support scheme and due to the Renewable Energy Directive of the EU that favors residues and waste biofuels because of the larger greenhouse gas savings compared to biofuels being produced from traditional food and feed crops. And so it's kind of an a market mechanism that works quite well. So we see incentives for companies using more of those wastes and residues, as the greenhouse gas accounting methodology favors them over the traditional biofuel crops.
Well, thank you for that. Excellent. Very interesting to see that Brazil and Germany have very different natural conditions, geographic conditions, but still countries can sort out what kind of potential for bioenergy they can play in the supply chain, in technological solutions. So I think we have a very positive prospect for collaboration between both countries in bioenergy as well. Now, last but not least, Professor Gonçalo Pereira, would like to invite you to join this conversation and hear from you about your research and how do you see the prospects for bioenergy in this moment. As the market evolves, we have new policies in place, we have prospects for new technologies, and the need to accelerate the pace of decarbonization and also paying attention to energy security. So how do you see the research contributing to those objectives and in this current context?
So, Thiago, thank you. Thank you. Hello to everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with Pietro, Eduardo, Gepov. I think we are living in a very important moment, and very difficult. We must be really careful about the next steps because, in my opinion, we got a lot of marketing. We got a lot of I would not say fake news, just to take a name that is very, very popular nowadays, but it's a kind of when we begin to go really very strict in the direction of some technologies without thinking with details what would be the consequence of it. For example, I always repeat this when we speak about electric car by batteries. When we look carefully, we are speaking about mining. Mining is not renewable. Absolutely, is not renewable at all. That means electric car is a great technology because electric motors are much more efficient than combustion motors. However, metallic battery as the reserve of energy for the vehicle, it's a very, very bad idea. Very bad idea. Then what I see, and this is, in my opinion, the most dangerous politics is when this politics is not directly connected with careful analysis, and without understand life cycle analysis, we understand nothing. Then we need to put life cycle analysis in every process that we do. We got some numbers from Pietro and Eduardo speaking about the numbers of ethanol. And when we look carefully about this, the first conclusion is it has always been hydrogen. Hydrogen is not new. It has always been hydrogen. Since the beginning of the universe, actually, it has always been hydrogen. What we have with the ethanol, with the biomethane, and even the biodiesel, is that we have a vector for this hydrogen to be transported. As we see now, for example, with this, let's say, this commotion on the hydrogen, that people see the obvious. It's not easy to transport hydrogen as a gas. We need to find vectors, and then we try to go to ammonia, and then we try to go to e-fuels. And I have seen, for example, I think three weeks ago, the minister of Germany saying that the combustion vehicle will persist in Germany for a long time. However, the problem is not, I think we have a problem here with the energy. I hope that you can continue to hear me. Then we have a problem. We have a problem with the combustible, but not a problem with the combustion. This is the most important thing to understand. Combustion, if you use the correct combustible, is great, it's perfect. This is the logics behind the e-fuels, and this is correct. However, we can go beyond the e-fuels. When we go to the fuel cells, and we have some contract with two companies, and these companies are convicted, are really decided to go in this direction, because when we connected biofuel like ethanol or even biomethane with electricity by fuel cells, then we more than double the efficiency of the fuel utilization in an electric car, a full electric car. And in my opinion, this is the future. And one question that we heard frequently and we discuss a lot with these automobile companies is, but is this possible to have ethanol everywhere or sufficient ethanol in order to run this new technology so that we are not going to produce a technology only for Brazil because the market is not sufficient for such technology? It's really, it's just a matter of analysis. When we look at Brazil, we have around 190 million hectares of pasture. Most of this pasture are low quality pasture. When you put sugarcane or other energy crop on this, the capture of carbon is enormous. The increase in the quality of the environment around is great. And we produce jobs. Jobs, in my opinion, is the most important thing to produce in the world today. Look, when we go to this area only in Brazil, and we go to the second technology or the second generation technology that has been initiated beyond or ahead the correct time. It was again a commotion. Everybody wanted to be the first to have the second generation running in order to sell technology for everybody. And then we committed the very simple errors in this process, and these errors that we are now recovering with the announcement of Raízen to make it the second generation mill, and this has the let's say the possibility to open this technology for the world. And then when we look at the several energy crops like energy cane, like agave, and several others that we have in Brazil with very high capacity to convert photosynthesis in chemical molecules. When we look at second generation applied to this, with less than half of this pasture that we have in Brazil, we would have ethanol to replace the gasoline of all the world. Look, I'm speaking about 190 million hectares. In Africa, you have 540 million hectares to be applied with this kind of culture and technology. Then, instead of having migration to Europe, to Germany, and so on and so forth, we can have with this kind of strategy, sustainability, environmental sustainability, jobs, a lot of jobs, and very, very high level technology represented by the fuel cells that, in my opinion, can be the future of motorization. That is my first comments, and it's a lot of opportunities. For example, Bosch has just acquired less than 1 year ago a big company, or rights, a relevant part in a big company that is the most important company in the fuel cell production in the world. That means we must reduce the size of these equipment to put in the car. Not only the cars, you can use this in ships, you can use this in railways, everywhere. So that's it for a moment.
Thank you, Professor Gonçalo, for sharing your perspectives and I think highlighting some of the aspects that we heard before about the diversity of solutions that need to be combined, and driving our attention as well to other vulnerabilities and issues related to supply chain when we move to decarbonize transportation and industry. So biofuels can be part of the portfolio, right? It's a matter of making the adjustments in the policies and understanding that we have a global industry, automobile, for example, but we have regional markets that can be developed and have a place for biofuels as well. But not biofuels as it is today. Biofuels with more with new technologies combined to make it even more attractive as a solution. But one thing that I think it's very important, we heard from Eduardo in the beginning about the sustainability side of biofuel production. And so I would have a question to the panel, and Eduardo, please feel free to start if you like, about innovation. Research and innovation has driven a huge productivity gain in biomass production. How do you see the potential for continue that process of increasing productivity? Because we see potential for biofuels in aviation, biofuels in shipping, biofuels in other sectors. So going beyond the existing markets. So will we have biomass for all those new markets, or will we have to prioritize the biomass for those markets where it's harder to deliver decarbonization with electrification, for example, or other available solutions? How do you see this issue about productivity and biomass supply for biofuel production in a sustainable way?
Thank you, Thiago. I think you've raised a very important question that it was somehow already tackled by both Professor Gonçalo and also Mr. Pietro. That is basically how to ensure that the production of these biofuels is made on a sustainable way. I think that there are three important aspects. The first one is regarding the improvement of technologies that will increase the production in the same area. So we are talking, in this case, we are talking not only about increasing the productivity of the sugarcane production, but also new technologies that was also brought in this panel regarding the use of second generation ethanol, that you can practically almost double the production of ethanol in the same area. So we have to address technologies that will increase the productivity in the same using the same area. Second, something important aspect brought by Professor Gonçalo is the potential to increase the production of sugarcane or other feedstocks in areas considered degraded ones. Professor Gonçalo mentioned the huge area that we still have in Brazil, for instance, used as degraded pastures that could be part of it used to produce other crops that would even increase the carbon storage in this land. Because as you know, the degraded pasture has a serious problem in terms of carbon storage. And third, last but not least, it was also mentioned in this panel, is regarding the possibility of the regional diversification of the production throughout the world. We have nowadays at least 100 countries that already produce sugar and sugarcane that with a very easy and little stimulus could start to diversify this production and start production ethanol on a sustainable ways in areas that you can produce biomass on a very competitive basis, but also making sure that you have the correct rules, the correct policies to guarantee the level of sustainability as we've been working hard here in Brazil.
Thank you, Eduardo. Let me hand now to Gerolf to share his perspectives or add any comments at this point. Gerolf.
Yeah, thank you. So I wanted to add, when we look at the future perspective of biofuels, I guess it is clear that biofuels will mainly be used in those sectors that are hard or even impossible to electrify. So this is not only the existing car fleet that runs on biofuels, but these are also other applications like heavy-duty machinery, or agricultural machinery. So all those applications that need high energy density that cannot be provided by battery electric applications. So it is clear that we will have a mix of renewable energies and the biofuels will have to play their role where other renewables cannot go. This is, as I said, the existing car fleet, and these are all the other already existing combustion engines that need high energy density. And politics has to acknowledge that biofuels are a well-established and also available technology. And we have to use this technology in order to reach in a timely manner our climate and energy targets. Because if we only wait for the green hydrogen in the future, or if we wait for electrification, then we lose time in the fight against climate change.
Well, thank you for adding to that. Very interesting. We have a question from the audience, and I would like to ask the panel to comment, if you like. The role of biofuel cells. Professor Gonçalo mentioned the issue about mining and sustainability, for example, with regard to the batteries that are part of the electric vehicles with batteries, and fuel cells, and in particular, not only hydrogen, but for example, ethanol fuel cells could tackle or address some of the sustainability issues from another perspective. So how do you see, and this technology, as far as I'm concerned, Pietro, is covered in the Fuel of the Future program as well. So would you provide us with a brief comment on the role of biofuel cells in this big picture in the role of biofuels in the transition?
Thanks, Bahal. Of course, we believe that electrification is more just batteries, and when you gain electrical vehicles. We believe that electrification, we can use hybrid and we can use fuel cell as well. And we have research here. I think that Professor Gonçalo can explain better how is going the research. And we are trying to find more resource for research development and innovation using, for example, ANP clause. ANP is the regulatory authority for natural gas, petroleum, and biofuels here in Brazil. And the oil and gas industry need to invest 1% of the revenues from oil and gas reserves in research, and we want to boost these investments to develop. One of the key subjects is related to fuel cell. We see a lot of potential of ethanol fuel cell and the biomethane fuel cell as well, because we have the infrastructure of supply. So we have the infrastructure nowadays to distribute ethanol, and it's easier and reduce the cost of electrification process. And as we are talking here, we believe that we need to coexist a lot of solutions, including fuel cell. So we need to have fuel cell, EVs, biofuels, everything we need to use to achieve our target to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah, thank you. Professor, would you like to add anything to that? You were mentioned.
Yeah. First of all, I had a problem here in the electricity in my room. If this would be fuel cell, I have not this problem. We would not experience this problem of breaking the transmission because look, we have a very wrong idea that electricity is something that you have a plug and you put something inside this plug to have the electricity. Electricity is flow of electrons. When you look at the biomass, what is actually biomass? Biomass is not less than a battery of CO2. It's the photosynthesis that charges the CO2 with a lot of electrons. That means, in my opinion, and it's very good, it's essential with Pietro is doing in this field of the future, is essential, can change not only Brazil, but the way that the world think. When we begin to understand that what we have in the biomass is source of electricity. But in order to convert the source of electricity in electricity, we need the fuel cells. Fuel cells is a very old technology. And now we need to put a lot of effort in order to convert these old ideas, these old technologies, in technologies that can be used for everything, including the functioning of small cars, like, for example, the Nissan, 6 years ago, brought to Brazil a prototype working, making something like 20 to 26 kilometers per liter in a prototype. We can go in this prototype and convert this in a real technology. And for Germany, this is a huge opportunity.
Well, thank you. We're now heading to the end of this panel, but before I will still have a final round for burning final comments. But I would like to inform and apologize that Mr. Pablo DC, he was originally planned to join us, but he had a last-minute problem, and he unfortunately could not join us today. The executive chairman of Volkswagen Latin America. But now for a final round, if any of you would like to leave a final comment, 30 seconds. Pietro, would you like to start?
Yes. Oh, my final comment is that we are working together with Germany government. We have a lot of actions here that GIZ is conducting, and we're working together to develop sustainable aviation fuel here in Brazil. We have a lot of support to develop biomethane and biogas industry, and we hope that we can continue to work together and to promote the use of low carbon fuels in all the sectors that is possible. Thank you.
And you have we have also worked, Pietro. You mentioned the bilateral cooperation with with Germany, but also with the IEA on the TCPs as well, right?
Right. It's a long history of collaboration, and we really appreciate this collaboration in Brazilian government.
Excellent. The TCPs are the technology cooperation programs under the frame of the International Energy Agency, and it's been really interesting to have the industry and a number of institutions collaborating there. Any other burning final comment? Anyone? Eduardo? And
Thiago, if you allow me very quickly, I'd like to leave 3 major messages. First one, we are fully convinced that ethanol it can be an important solution for 3 of the major challenges of this century. First, climate change. It can decarbonize one of the sectors that most emit in the world. Second, a solution to reduce air pollution in major cities throughout the world. As you can see, more and more cities with huge problems of air pollution. And three, can be an economic solution to reduce the dependence on imported oil and provide an alternative to the rural areas. Second message, we are fully convinced, and this was, I think that it was brought in all the message here in this panel, is that we're going to have multiple solutions for the decarbonization of the transport sector. And ethanol should for sure be one of them. And third and final comment is that we have to work together, not only to provide private sector and public sector to provide sound, long-term public policies that create the conditions to have a sustainable biofuels or any other program that will provide incentives to the decarbonization of the sector, but also among countries. And as Pietro has just mentioned, very important to have this kind of cooperation among countries that consume, that can produce clean energy. And this is the best way. We are facing this problem right now. Unfortunately, due to this very inexplicable war, we more and more see that we need to diversify not only the sources of energy, but also the geographic origin of these sources of energy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And finally, Gerolf, please.
I'll be quick. So with respect to time, I just wanted to highlight that with respect to the Ukraine war, there's one important message that we also have to consider. Biofuels are a sustainable source of domestic energy supply, and they help us replacing fossil energy that are imported from regions and unstable countries that we want to reduce our energy imports from.
Yeah, that's very important. And so, for example, I think biofuels can play a role in reducing the pressure on the demand side for biodiesel, for fossil diesel, and for gasoline, for example. So I think this is a very important comment. With this, we're coming to an end of this panel. I would really like to thank our panelists, Pietro, Eduardo, Gerolf, and Professor Gonçalo. Thank you so much for joining us, for sharing your perspectives. It was a really interesting conversation here today. So thank you so much. And hope to see you in a near future or at the Berlin Energy Transition Dialogue. And finally, just to remind you that this event was promoted by the Embassy of Brazil in Germany in collaboration with the Ministry of Mines and Energy of Brazil and the Brazilian Trade and Investment Promotion Agency, Apex Brazil. We were really pleased to have you with us here today, learning and discussing a little bit more about hydrogen and sustainable biofuels and their role in the energy transition, in particular the challenges and opportunities in Brazil and in the cooperation Brazil-Germany. So thank you so much for your audience. Thank you, and hope to see you soon in other opportunities. So thank you, everyone. Have a great day, all of you. Bye-bye.